And I'm going to start from left with Whitney, and we'll move around and everybody will just say, you know, who you are, not just what you're doing now, but I think it's important a little bit about the past and what you've done in the past.
Alrighty. Hi, I'm Whitney Scott. In the past, where I guess it all began, I was a government contractor in big data analytics, and what we called at the time machine learning before it was rebranded to artificial intelligence. And I took that data insights and I transferred from government contracting into the outdoors, and I worked for KOA at an executive level for 11 years. I was their chief marketing officer. I built their glamping brand Terramore and became their chief operating officer before becoming their senior vice president of Horizon Line strategy. Recently, about a year ago, I started a market intelligence company called Walden, where we build products and services to help the business of the outdoors, not just outdoor hospitality, but outdoor retail. We have products like accommodation buying guides, where you can look at all the products, glamping accommodations in the United States in one place. It's kind of like a consumer report. We have marketing services, branding services, and strategy services all around the data of things.
All right. My name is Scott Barr. My company is Karen Consulting Group, and we do market research and analysis within the outdoor hospitality sector. I've worked in hospitality for a long time. I've worked in outdoor hospitality for about 25 years. And we kind of got our start with KOA, doing campground level research, where we did over a million surveys with campers and guests throughout the years with that effort. And I've continued those efforts as well. And I've worked on a lot of the efforts within the industry, from whether it's outdoor hospitality, accommodations, experiences, as well as the RV industry. I do a great deal of work within that sector as well. So great to be here. That's what I've been doing, and I'm kind of immersed in data. I guess that would be the bottom line.
Morning, everybody. I'm Sarah Dusek. I'm one of the early founding operators of the glamping industry in the US. I founded a company called Under Canvas, which I spent about a decade growing and scaling. And I am now the founder of a new travel/climate company called Few and Far. We have just opened our first lodge in South Africa last year.
Hi, I'm Todd Winperry. My career's really been around initially market analysis and then brand expansion. I did mergers, acquisitions, and development for hotels around the world, a lot in Asia, because some of the major brands you probably know. And towards the end of that era, I was working mostly in independent boutique and lifestyle hotels, if you will, which were really designed towards the millennial traveler. And then the company I was working for got sold to Hyatt, and I sort of said RIP to that cool sector. And I saw in the glamping industry a lot of similarities between the growth of independent and lifestyle hotels and the glamping industry, where there were new entrants who hadn't been in hospitality before, coming in with new, fresh ideas on how to do hospitality, but in the outdoors. And I was consulting to AutoCamp at the time, briefly, and they asked me to join, so I joined them, and I told them to spend a couple of months and understand this industry. And so I studied it, and the more I studied, the more I fell in love with it. Eventually, I started my own consulting firm and did that for 4 or 5 years, and then just recently, Aramark decided they wanted to buy into the industry much more heavily, and so they picked me up to do mergers and acquisitions for them, and that's what I'm doing now. Along the way, I also wrote a book, like Sarah did here, on the business of glamping, which is available on Amazon. It's a plug.
Excellent. Well, Scott, we're kind of crashing your party a little bit with this panel, because what we're doing is we're looking at your research that you've put together, and which is available for all of you listening for free. You can download this, and we will have the QR code on the final slide. And just give us some background as to how you got involved doing this report with the show, and how many years, and how you put it together.
This is the third consecutive year of the report. It was originally David Corse, who I think is around here somewhere, approached me about doing kind of a state of the industry report. Kind of similar to some of the other efforts we've done in the past. Came in and we distribute the questionnaire to people within the industry, and it goes out through several different channels. And what we do is we ask people who are current and prospective operators, and I think the first year we also did suppliers as well, to ask them what do they see, what's going on out there, what are their experiences at that individual level. And then what we do is we compile all that information and try to tell a story of what's going on within the industry right now. So that was the genesis of this work, and it continues on. And if you do get a survey, please fill it out. I know they mentioned the one on the show, but if you get one like next summer, please fill it out. We love it. We like to hear from a lot of people. The more the better. But we have a good cross section of people that answer it. And so that's kind of the background. And we feel like it's you'll be able to see the results, some of the trends, where things are moving, and so on.
Well, we're going to move on now to some of the key takeaways. And this is just a few of the key takeaways here, and hopefully with my dreadful eyesight I'll be able to read them here. I mean, the good news is that demand and pricing are up this year, Scott. That seems to be the key takeaway. We're looking at, am I saying, $251 per night on average. Perhaps you want to talk us through these key takeaways here that we can see on the screen.
Sure. Yeah, as Steph just mentioned, so you have a good combination there of demand and pricing, both being up. That's as a business, that's a good thing to see. From my perspective as a researcher, I really like to see the demand side increase. That to me is what everything else will follow from there. Again, the ADR, I think everybody who operates any kind of park knows it's a challenge, figuring out how to determine what your ADR should be, where it should be, what consumers and guests are willing to pay. But they're both up. I think as long as that keeps pace, then we'll keep track of that as well. And the cost to enter has surged, but the revenue with the increased demand and the ADR, even though the cost to start an operation to add on has increased a decent amount. But again, revenue is keeping pace with that, so we're positioned well from that perspective. And the product mix is diversifying. The things like on-off-grid offerings, different types of accommodation on site, we're seeing that. And I think that bodes well too, because you're appealing to different segments of guests who are out there who want different types of accommodations and experiences.
We've got more here, as you can see. So, minimum stay policies. Is this an area that you've just introduced into the research, or was this? Did you ask this from the start?
I believe we asked this last year as well, but what we've seen is a fairly large increase in the number of parks who are having a minimum stay of at least 2 nights, and having additional fees for pets. The minimum stay is something I'd love to talk to anyone about who wants to, but I'm going to talk about it now because we'll get completely sidetracked.
We'll just whiz through these and then we're going to dig deeper in and see what this actually means in terms of our experts here, what they feel. But we have the amenities session that Whitney is going to be moderating tomorrow morning, where we really dig deep into the amenities. The interesting point there about location, nature-led, and urban adjacent. So we're seeing a sort of a split, really, or a mix of glamping types.
It's really a mix. The location, as they say, location matters. So if you want to be located by some sort of natural feature that is an attraction to people to come stay with you. And also close to urban areas, people want to escape. We know that the glamping guest is a different profile as well, a different demographic, and thus that urban dweller is going to be a real nice guest profile for you. Again, a lot of people, they fit the profile well.
Excellent, and I think that nobody will be surprised to see that financing remains the top impediment the top barrier really to growth and starting a business. And Sarah, I want to now move over to you because none of this sort of useful data was available when you were starting under Canvas. So where on earth did you find information that you needed or customer profiling? I mean, talk us through the process of how you got started.
I learned everything the hard way, Steph. So, yeah, I mean, I was saying yesterday, but there's a lot to be said for what I call failing fast. And it took us about 3 years before we eventually landed on our end business model, which effectively became under Canvas, which meant we tried various different iterations of attempted experiences before we landed on our final business model. And that was largely because there was no data, there was no market, there was no one else in the space, and all we had was I was trying to emulate the African safari experience that has been around for 100 years in Africa, and trying to reimagine it. And one of the things that I think is really important for us today in order for this movement to keep moving and keep evolving is that we keep reimagining it. We won't end up with an industry that is broad and varied and vast if we don't keep imagining what the future could look like. And so what I would say about the takeaways is they're an example of where we are today. They are not the end of where we're going to end. And all of us in this room get to contribute towards building what the future of the glamping industry looks like. But when we started, we literally started with an instinct. Lots of those instincts were wrong. What I thought people would do and what I hoped they would do, they didn't do. And we had to adjust and we had to pivot. And actually, I think getting things wrong, things not working out, is part of this journey and part of the learning for what will work in your business, because what works for you might not be what works for Whitney or works for Todd or for Stephanie. So I think understanding how this industry works in general is really, really important, but then allowing to put your own expression on it and test the boundaries and see where the limitations are is actually important for trying to grow a business.
Excellent. I've got an extra guest on stage, as you may have noticed here. So this leads us, I mean, you were just saying about being different, trying new things out. Glamping is, it's traditionally been a novelty. How can we sort of ensure that it's a novelty that doesn't wear off? I mean, I've known everybody here on the stage with me since the very first glamping shows that we did sort of 8 years ago. Todd, I'm going to throw this one over to you. I mean, because Autocamp, for example, what was your thought when you first sort of encountered these types of glamping brands?
Yeah, when I first was looking at it and learning about it, I was like, oh my God, when I was a kid, we'd drive by an Airstream on the road, and I would go, wow, what is that thing? And my dad would say, don't look, we can't afford it. And he'd say, but what is it? He's like, well, it's kind of like an airplane, maybe a land yacht kind of thing. Anyway, so for me, being in an Airstream was obviously aspirational, and to see a whole campground filled with them, I was just like, a kid in a candy store. I said, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. But then putting my sort of market study analytical head on, I was like, but once you've done it, then would you want to do it again? And I keep that same skepticism right now. And I think what that it, in the beginning, it wasn't really an issue in the first couple of years when I was there anyway, or the first year I was there. But then when property opened in the East Coast and a bunch of hoity-toity, snooty travel writers came up from New York City to stay in the one in Cape Cod, they wrote, it's nice, but I don't need to do it again, basically was the answer. And so I think that's a good thing, actually, because what it does is it puts pressure on the operator in that particular case to make it not just about the unit. And if you read the comment cards on a lot of places under campus, you say, yeah, you know, they're comfortable and it's nice not to bring my sleeping bag and stuff like that. But really the comments then continue on, we did this and we did that and we saw that and this. And that's really where the comeback is what was the experience, not just what was around them when they were sleeping kind of thing. So that was kind of the thing, but I think it persists today.
Absolutely. And I'd like to move over to you, Whitney, actually, with this as well, because I've heard you speak on many podcasts, and I remember you talking to Ruben about how families is often an overlooked area. When we think of glamping, some of us think of like copper baths and the kind of couples exclusive high-end glamping, but you know, families, I know that my son, when he was younger, if they enjoy something, they will pester you to go back. If you want repeat guest experiences, just please the kids. Isn't that the case?
Yes, as a mother of 2 toddlers, absolutely. I have to go to the river every single day because there's snakes there and they want to see a snake. So like, you know, whatever grabs their attention is so important. I think, you know, it even goes back to where the data is. And we've been talking about this for 10 years, and we kind of built this market around the accommodations, that the accommodations drove bookings. But really, as we've seen, what drives extended stays, what drives repeat guests, is really the experience and amenity and service set that you put around the accommodation. And to that point, we came out with a lot of 2-person tents in this higher range, you know, $300 a night. And the reality is while, yes, you can build a $300 a night glamping resort, the majority of the market who wants to go glamping is actually families in the 250 and under market. Now, that doesn't mean we haven't met the demand on the higher end side. I'm just saying the breadth of the market is actually family, and it's actually $250 and lower a night. And that's why we see a lot of glampers in traditional campgrounds, because their ADR is a little bit lower, they have bigger amenity sets, they benefit from efficiencies of scale right there on the park because they have, you know, 300 sites, and they have a splash park, and they have RVs, and they have accommodations. And so, and we see a lot more families glamping on traditional campgrounds than we do in what I'm going to call a glamp ground for outdoor resort or whatever you want to call your resort. So it's really important to just understand that there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of repeat experiences actually come from the amenity set. It comes from who you're building for, and understanding who that target guest is, and really being able to bring them back through those experiences and through those services.
Wonderful. And here we have one of the slides from Scott's research. Scott, tell us a little bit, talk us through this here, if you will.
What you're seeing here is like what percentage of guests fit into each of these categories. So what you can see there is that the biggest, if you look at the colors, dark blue, that's that 76 to 100% is couples. So couples are making up a lot of this, but families, again, are a big part of it, and that's one of the things that I think we found out early. Glamping was how many families enjoyed it. Like you said, you bring the kids, they have those emotional connections to their experiences. And so you can see the average stay in I think this is something to keep track of. And this is a cart and a horse thing, which is 2024, the average stay was 2.2 days. You can see 2025, it was 2.7. So a half a day. If you round these, that's 2 versus 3. What you're seeing there is this due to demand for longer stays, or is it because of policies for extended stays? So again, like I said earlier, that's a topic that everyone should consider if they're owning or operating the glamping park, because it's really important. So that's what you're seeing here. So
Wonderful. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. Still fighting this fly here. And we're looking at what we were just talking about, experience versus accommodation. And now, Sarah, I'm going to come back to you because you're in the unique position that you are getting a do-over, essentially. So, you're getting to do it all over again. I mean, it's
Really crazy.
So, what, in your head, have you got a different type of guest profile for your second time? And what kind of guest experience do you have in mind for them compared to the first time you were under Canvas?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question because we're really now doubling down on experiences. So when we launched Under Canvas the first time, I knew experiences were important, but we definitely focused on the lodging. And now I'm all in 110% on creating very, very extraordinary experiences. Be that through dining, be that through wellness, be that through outdoor activities. The whole curation of a stay and the experiences someone has while they stay with us is now really what I'm focused on. And teaching my team how to create what I call magic moments. Largely because, and yes, I am taking people on trips overseas largely now, as opposed to only short-term staycations in the US. But largely because I think the appetite in this space is driven by a desire for something that we have lost. And we've lost a lot through technology. We've gained an enormous amount through technology, right? But we've also lost something that many of us who are 40 plus remember from our own childhoods. And we remember from another era when life was simpler and playing by a stream was really critical, sitting around a fire pit. There's something magical about simple things. And so I am focused now on thinking about how we recreate simple things and create moments of magic. And I have teenage boys, and like many of you parents will know, it's really critical to our existence as a family that we connect with each other. We have time doing things together, that all of us get off our screens and actually engage. And I think nature has an extraordinary capacity to be able to inspire us and connect us and rewild ourselves in very different ways. And so I personally think studying design is really critical because I think it's what helps you sell something. It's what makes something that's Instagrammable instantly sort of through an image, and great design does that, is a hook. But once you've hooked somebody, great design is not enough. And that's where really creating really interesting experiences comes in.
Yeah, totally. And Todd, I mean, now what you're providing are those experiences in a lot of cases. So tell us what, out of the sort of adventure experiences that Aaron Mark provide, what are the top sort of for this kind of glamping sector?
Yeah, well, we provide a lot of experiences. We do snowmobiling and rafting and tubing and mule rides. We do, if you want to climb El Capitan, you've got a course you can do that through. But so we do all of those things, and I'm looking to buy more operating businesses that provide those experiences, because we see that if you look at an outdoor destination, whether it's Lake Tahoe or Grand Canyon or Jackson Hole, we see the way people are, and I hope I'm right, Whitney, correct me if I'm wrong, but the way we're seeing people booking is they're determining what experience they want to do first. And so they'll look at an outdoor destination. I think I want to go here, and then what are the things I want to do there? They figure that out, and then they go to the accommodation. So we want to kind of acquire that activity first, so then hopefully maybe we can get into the lodging that we have, or whatever else we might operate in that particular destination. But I did want to talk just quickly on something Sarah was picking up on the design element. And in my consulting practice, when we looked at a new property, just a blank bit of property, I really was concerned about how they were dealing with downtime for everybody and what they were doing. I look at hospitality as taking care of people, but also you have the reality that labor is very expensive. So I see hospitality as knowing what somebody wants before they even know they want it. And if you can do that with something that doesn't cost you a lot of labor, whether it's putting in some sort of activity around the property or whatever it might be, a nice pathway to the river with all the snakes or whatever it might be, you're thinking before them what they know they want, and that'll bring them back. And it doesn't really cost you a lot of money to maintain that. So I think looking at your glamping operation, and that they've got, yes, they may be going outside to do an activity for an hour or 2 or 5 hours or whatever. You still got another 7, 8 hours you got to cover when they're not sleeping or eating. So what are they going to do? And that was learning at AutoCamp. We thought, everybody's just going to go off to Yosemite. They're going to be there all day. They'll come back. They'll already have fed. They'll come. They'll go sit by the campfire. They'll go to sleep. And that wasn't true. Really, people are like, hey, there's something. What are we going to do? What do we do now? So I just wanted to touch on that because design comes into that. Also, it's an Instagram world, so you got to have a money shot. If you're going to have weddings, you got to have an amazing shot for the couple, and designing around nature and where you get those really good moments. It's money. It's important.
Now, obviously, after this session, we're all going to go outside and we're going to look at these incredible accommodations and these structures, from clear plastic tubes to wagons with windows, and God knows what is so exciting. But I mean, Whitney, you provide data sets for people starting out that will look at what the land can provide, and really it's easy to get overexcited about structures without realizing everything that the land can provide. And you spoke very movingly on Sarah's American Glamping Show podcast about sort of learning a little bit through your data sets. Explain how that works with sort of holistic picture of the land.
Yeah, so what we built, so in building Terramore and looking at scaling it, one of the things we had to build at KOA was kind of an algorithm, or I just needed to build myself an algorithm to kind of just understand what makes the next Terramore if we're going to scale it. And so I had to put some boundaries around things, and what really it came to was there wasn't an efficient way to look at a piece of land through multiple scopes and say, is this good? Is this site a good fit for outdoor hospitality? And so in coming into Walden, what we built is a product called the Lot. And the Lot looks at a site specifically from the site itself, is there, is it in a flood zone? Kind of the basics of the site. Is it in a flood zone? What zoning is it? That type of thing. And it looks at it from a scoring perspective, good or bad. And then it looks at kind of some other things in the site that we don't really think about, but things like, is there bird migrations here? And what kind of birds? Because if it's a rare bird, do you know how many birders are in their birding era right now? Like the entire millennial generation? That's important, and you can market that. So we look at bird migration, wildlife migrations. We look at your dark sky setting. We actually have a GIS analyst that looks at where does the sun set, and on this piece of land, where is the best view of that sunset, and what are those views? Then we look at the region and the tourism that happens in that area, because as Todd said, location is really important. Spoiler alert, tomorrow morning you will learn more things, but location is the first thing most tourists pick. So regardless of what you have, they have to pick your location first. And so tourism and most resorts do not provide all of the service. You're not going to feed them every single time unless you're building an all-inclusive resort. So are there restaurants? How accessible are there? Is there takeout? Medical services, fire services, cell services, Wi-Fi services. There's so many services that affect your experience. How can you easily tell that when you're looking at buying a site, or you have a site and are saying, does this make sense for a glamping resort? Because there are so many intricacies that can really say, this is an amazing experience. You have eagle migrations. That is so cool, let's build there. But maybe it's like, yeah, but to get there, your road is closed, 5 months out of the year. How do we can build to that, but maybe it's not the best decision. So the law actually looks at all sorts of types of data to help you understand whether or not outdoor hospitality is a good fit for that parcel.
That is amazing. So let me try and get to the next slide here. And Scott, we're going to get back to you on this. Can you tell us what's happening in this slide here?
What we're seeing here is, overall, the results are relatively stable, but you're seeing a little bit of movement in the number of simply standalone developments. So, and thus, that's being made up for in, add-ons. So at some other place. So it's not significant, but it's something to keep an eye on. And I do think the market overall, this could be part of what's happening out there. I think what you're also seeing is a decline in the number of off-grid properties that are being developed. So, but you're seeing the corresponding, of people who have both. Thus, it's like it's what we talked about earlier, that diversifying the mix. So, and again, a standalone off-grid property is less, attractive versus the mix. And there's a lot to say about that, but.
And we were chatting a little bit before this session, weren't we, Scott? And we were sort of saying, I asked you, what do people come to your booth? What's the most commonly asked question? And you said...
Data. Where's the data?
But I said, but why do you think they want the data? Do you think it's because they've already got a piece of land and they want, justification that they've made the right choice, that this is the right piece of land for what they want to do?
Yes, that's the quick answer. This is one of those topics that's super important and builds on what Whitney was just talking about. It's like, just talk to Whitney before you do anything. So, because our approach, and what I talk about a lot, is, are you doing confirmatory? You want confirmatory data, or do you want exploratory? Exploratory is going to tell you, is this a good fit? Confirmatory is, I think it's a good fit, and I want you to tell me it is. So that's the difference, and it's kind of that mindset of let's explore a little bit. Let's look around. Let's talk to Whitney, and we'll buy her lunch, and maybe she'll give us some good hints on our property. But that's the whole approach. And again, it has to start with that. Is it a good fit? Not, it's a good fit. How do I make it work?
Yeah, absolutely. As I say, shiny things. It's like what we're going to see outside later. It's so enticing, but is it the right thing for your piece of land? Now here we're going back to this minimum stays and average daily rates, the sort of nuts and bolts. Did you, Sarah, have, under Canvas in the early days, did you learn this the hard way again, or did you have a rigid policy on minimum stays?
No, and I would say for everyone starting out, do not have rigid policies on this thing, because the idea is that you want to put heads in beds, right? So the harder you make it for people to put their head in your bed, the harder it will be. So when you have enormous demand and you sell out really fast, it's really easy to put minimum night stays in place, but it's not where you start. So I would keep it to a 1 night minimum until you are oversubscribed, selling out really fast, and can fill everything you've got, and then you know actually you probably need more units. So yeah, I don't think it makes sense.
Excellent. Okay.
Ever.
Great. Let's move on to the next one. This just illustrates the point, doesn't it, Scott, of what people are currently doing.
Absolutely. That you can see that a majority of the people who answered the survey said that they do have minimum stay policies, of 2 nights or more. And again, how does it apply? If they do have a minimum, it's 71% are saying that it applies to all stays. So again, that there's a good conversation to be had around special events and holidays, I think. However, as Sarah was just alluding to, it's like if you're starting off, it's like this can be, and if anyone wants to talk about it, I have data on the stays. So just stop by the booth, we can talk.
Okay, we've got
And I think
another.
that's right. I think I was going to say the likelihood of people staying more than 1 night is really high. But creating obstacles for people to give you their money is what you don't want to do.
I got a question about that. So in the very traditional hotel, sort of the army of hotels, which is kind of the boot camp, which is when you work for Marriott, you open up a hotel and you as a general manager are driven to get to whatever the stabilized occupancy might be for your pro forma, whether it's 75% to 80%. And so you do everything you can to get your occupancy to where you think you need to be. And then you drive rates. And once you found that occupancy, then you move the rate up to where you think you need to be. So that's traditionally how it's done. And I think that speaks to what you were saying is like, hey, let's get the heads in beds first and foremost. My question for you though is, when you come to Memorial Day or 4th of July or Labor Day, do you now go, hey, I'm sorry, but I can't. If someone can't stay Friday and Saturday night, they're not going to stay at all. So I can't do just Friday, just Thursday. Would you implement
Not
that
when you're
across
starting out.
No, I know. So I just want to make it. That's why I want to make a distinction between you're starting out and trying to build. But once you're there and maybe you can't add more units to deal with those crush periods, but would you do it during the crush period? When you know you're going to be oversubscribed?
Yeah, I mean, the question is, do you know if you're going to be oversubscribed, right? I think it's so much easier if you've got a track record that says we know we sell out for Memorial Weekend like months and months, and you can do it, because it makes sense to limit your turnovers, right? Because turnovers are labor, turnovers are like it's extra effort, and when you're trying to turn over a lot of rooms on a very busy weekend, it's a lot of work and it's a lot of headache. So you do want to try and avoid that, but you've got to have pretty good understanding that this is what happens on this weekend. And I think we bought the guest ranch that we operated on our first site in Yellowstone. We bought the guest ranch a few years later, and they had cabins and a small lodge, and it was running had a 3-night minimum, and it meant they had all these odd rooms like all over the place because they only had 15 rooms in this guest ranch, and because they had a 3-night minimum, they had all these empty rooms, and they didn't have sophisticated enough technology to then say, okay, we can actually sell that room for 1 night and that room for 1 night, and it just created masses of holes and masses of waste. And the moment we bought it and we switched it over to just a 1-night minimum, the occupancy was higher, the ADR was higher, and we didn't have any issues around, okay, this is a busy weekend, this is not a busy weekend, and we could just sell the rooms. So that has always been my approach, and just trying to make it easier for people. And the more the time goes on, it's easier to carve out some
some weekends
I
like
think
that.
that's incredibly useful to hear that from actual experience rather than just a sort of theory. I mean, if you do find you've got gaps in your, occupancy, then as we were leading on to the next slide, retreats, group bookings, corporate buyouts, this sort of thing. I mean, absolutely worth its weight in gold, but you need... Especially for low season.
Absolutely.
That's absolutely prime for when you're not going to
You've
have
got
demand.
this whole site, and it doesn't matter what season it is, you can still get people in to do activities, to do... I mean, Todd, you used to... We did a session on this a while back, didn't we? And we talked about, thinking about it from the start when it comes to infrastructure. Explain a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, you just, as Sarah mentioned, you're going to get shoulder seasons, you're going to get low seasons and things like that. And you just, if you build your business plan just on Friday and Saturday night, or 3 months of good midweek, and then nothing in the shoulders or nothing in the low season or very low or only weekends, which are easy to sell always, you're probably not going to get there. So you end up finding out sometimes the hard way that group business ends up being your profit margin over the year, because if you didn't have that, you might not have gone over the break-even point. Getaway, now Postcard, which is owned by Marriott, they built their whole thing without any communal space whatsoever. There was self-check-in, and you were there to commune with nature, with yourself, maybe with your loved ones, and that's it. There wasn't community with anybody else built into the model. And about 4 or 5 years into it, they're like, oh man, some of our properties are really dying because they can't get through the shoulder season without just being completely empty. So they had to go back and hire group salespeople and start creating spaces where they could in their plan. So yeah, having an understanding that you might need a buyout at any point in time, or you might need a small group, go for it.
Okay, I can see Sarah waving the microphones in the back there. So I'm going to open us up to questions. We haven't got really time with the amenities. We're going to do that tomorrow. And so I'm going to flip through to the download slide, and we'll open it up to questions then, please.
All right, I have one. So Todd, you talked about Marriott's strategy for ramping up new units, new hotels. What would your guidance be setting up like a new glamping site and adopting that similar methodology? Hey, let's just cover variable costs, get to our desired occupancy, and then look at overall profitability.
Yeah, I think having some sort of a revenue management program of some sort, I'm not sure if you're dealing with 3 or 4 properties, yeah, might be a little more of a gut feeling than an actual computer system. But if you're getting any bigger than that, then having revenue management, a commercial strategy, which is bigger than just revenue management, would be really important. And there's a number of consultants out there that can put that commercial strategy together for you that builds in how you're going to drive your occupancy over the first 3 to 4 years, and then how you're going to move the rate along with that, and how you can fill in those soft parts in the calendar. Does that answer your question?
Hi, my question's fairly similar to the previous one. You talked about kind of growing into it, and what would you recommend on the number of units if you were just starting? Would it be 2, 4, 6, 8, 10?
I have a strong opinion on this. Sorry, that was mine. Through building hundreds of campgrounds and converting, we had traditional campgrounds that we would put in glamping units. We would never allow a campground to only have 2 accommodations. Why? Because to understand your demand, right away, if you get a cancellation, you're at 50% occupancy or less. You get 2, you don't have it, you're at 0. So the cancellation and booking, you can't even start to understand demand just because of consumer behavior with cancellations and things like that. So we would never let a campground convert sites to accommodations without having at least 4 units. Because then at least you can start seeing some trend lines So if you're looking to start a campground or start adding units, I would say minimum of 4 units to really understand a trend line of occupancy and demand.
Thank you.
One of the data points that was mentioned is that financing is one of the top impediments in the industry. Is that different than other industries, or is that just across the board financing is a challenge?
No, it's pretty consistent across industries. It's the challenge because it determines what you can and cannot do. Whether you have the property or not, what type of development including,
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it is harder than other industries because you don't have any hard collateral. And often banks don't like anything other than bricks and mortar that they think they can resell. So it is more challenging than raising finance for a boutique hotel or a traditional building for the collateral reason.
Yeah, the same would go for institutional investors, like a real estate investment trust. They want real property, meaning bricks and mortar, things in the ground, the dirt, all of those things. They want those because they know that sits as a basis of their investment. The personal property, a tent, a trailer, that stuff hard to. If you can move it off.
I got around it by getting equipment loans. So equipment loans and there are some SBA loans that are good for equipment, for example, and there are a number of agencies that will do equipment lending, and even maybe your bank might do some equipment lending, but you are probably also going to have to guarantee that. You personally, you and your millions. And so, that's something to be mindful of, but I financed under canvas with credit cards and equipment loans. And that is how I built a multi-million-dollar enterprise.
Have we got
True story.
social stretches? Have we got time for more questions, Sarah?
Am I next? Okay. This is my 5th glamping show. I love this. And I remember 5 years ago when I was just thrilled about renting my hunting tent out. And now I'm actually at the exit strategy kind of level, where exiting my glamping industry, making a lot of money, like you just said, Sarah, is becoming a reality. So my question to you, because I certainly appreciate this executive talent that's up here, this history, that you guys are great. But what should I be doing right now if I'm thinking, okay, in a year or two, I could put my property on the market, I could actually exit, like you did, Sarah. And I don't know if anybody else out there has done this, but what should be on my mind right now to actually get to that point where I can sell big?
Great question. EBITDA. Does everyone know what EBITDA is? Okay. So EBITDA is basically your net income, right? So what becomes really, really important with selling a hospitality asset is how good your financials look, which sounds obvious, but actually, showing some trends is really important. So having good data is really, really important. So can you show me what your ADR has been doing year over year? Can you show me that your net income, your EBITDA numbers have been improving year over year? Can you show me, and maybe here's a really important thing, that there's a blue sky opportunity still? Is there still growth to be had out of your business? Because that's the reason to buy a business, right? That's why anybody buys business. It's why you might buy his business or I might buy his business, is that I think I can still make money from acquiring that business as opposed to doing it from scratch myself. Like, that it would save me time and I make more money than I would if I just started from scratch myself. So can you evidence, and there are many ways to evidence this, that actually there's a whole lot of opportunity coming from what I've already built and why you can make more money. So if you're thinking, okay, a couple of years from now I'd love to sell this, get your house in order. Like if you were going to go sell a house, you might take really great pictures. You might have all your inspections done. You might have this survey done, or that survey done, or you might fix the leaky roof, or you might do it so I do those things in preparation of, I'm trying to position this to sell it. So how do I show progress over time, keeping those, having good records. What we see often from small scale operators is the financials are rubbish. That we don't have good data, that we don't have records, that we can't tell where our, even things like customer data is really interesting, right? So where are your customers coming from? What's the demographic mix? Where do they live? How much are they spending? Because the more you can demonstrate this is what we know about our consumer, the easier it is for then someone to make a decision around, okay, well, we think there are loads more of that type of consumer, and if we just did this tweak and this tweak, we could do more of it, then it's really interesting and appealing. So there are lots of these little tweaks, and people like Todd, although he has a full-time job now, this was their bread and butter, right? Like helping people buy and sell. And what can you do to position yourself to look really good to a potential buyer? Maybe you make an acquisition now because it helps but you buy a little activity company that's down the road, and you put those two businesses together because now you're a bigger size, and if you're a bigger size, then you're more interesting to someone else who might pay a better multiple on your EBITDA. So there are all these little tricks. So it's worth getting some advice. It's worth talking to someone who does this for a living, and preparing yourself and thinking about how do I get ready, because this is what I'd like to do.
Absolutely brilliant. I know, Todd, you'd like to join in here, but we have got a couple more questions.
He's the expert.
Can we go to the next question, and then I think we're going to have to close.
Hi there. I already have a current glamping business, trying to improve occupancy during the slower weekdays. And I'm trying to think outside of the box so I guess, what are your opinions on gathering emails and such from guests and having a model similar to the model of timeshares and selling out our units as timeshares? Is that something that's worth considering, or has it ever been done before? And what are your thoughts on that?
It's definitely been done. There's a couple of places that do it. It's hard. Timeshares are hard. Timeshares lock people in, and the majority of leisure travelers aren't looking to lock in where they're going all the time, unless you have, like, I don't know your property, but if you're on a lake or something, that can be if you have the location that supports something like that, potentially that model. You have a lot of questions there. Gaining emails. If you said gaining guest emails, you should already be getting guest emails. If they're booking with you, do not let them book without giving them a phone number and an email. That should just be built into whatever system you have. If not, that would be my first number one. You could run, if you're trying to look for non-guest emails for marketing activity, that you could do through like running a giveaway or something like that, where they have to give you an email like a weekend at your resort, and then do a marketing campaign around it. You could do like events or things like that you don't have to pay to stay, but you host like a festival or something, and like entry, you have to like sign out a form or something like that. Also, just amping up your marketing. Retarget anybody who comes to your site. That's just putting a pixel on your website and then setting up a retargeting campaign in Facebook or Instagram or something like that. That's a way where you don't have to get necessarily customer emails, but you can at least start to retarget people with more sophisticated marketing. And then you also asked about just like generally how do you get midweek business. One of the ways is looking at like adding in corporate or group business, like we talked about, which is really important, but you do have to add the amenity sets and services to support corporate events. So do you have meeting space? Do you have activities that people can bond around? Do you have communal fire pits? Like those are things that are pretty standard to be able to have a group business. We only have time for one very quick question before the AC comes in.
Yes, quick question. So thank you so much for the report that we're able to download. I just have a quick question. In particular, are you seeing any data trends around more urban locations within 30 minutes of metropolitan areas with amenities of being in town, like corporate retreats, things like that, versus the more rural, nature destinations?
It does seem to be a growing segment. The pandemic actually boosted that because a lot of the folks in the urban areas wanted to get out. And one of the things they could do to get out is go camping and glamping. So you saw that infrastructure build up at that time. And then from that point on, people started to realize that being next to those population centers has already made a group of guests. Again, as I mentioned earlier, it fits the profile. So the urban centers to me is as long as there's something else there, an outdoors experience that they can have. There's a lot of great ways to get creative with that too. Because don't forget, a lot of people in some of the urban areas don't have transportation. So think that, consider that. But I see that as an opportunity, by the way. So yeah, I think, and we have seen that, and we've seen the demand. I do a lot of work from the guest perspective, so it's kind of a bottom up. So what I see is the demand for that is increasing, and as that increases, I think we'll see the infrastructure built around that.
Wonderful. Right, before the IC comes on, can you give my panel the biggest round of applause, please?